Lisa and John have made it super easy for me because they covered a lot of really good stuff, and they've already broken everybody into um, the terms and ideas. Water administration, what is that? And I'm looking at the list of participants, and there's a lot of heavy hitters out there. So some of this is going to be um, maybe too junior of a level, but there's a few of you that might get some good nuggets out of this. And so thank you. Yes, I'm the division engineer. I'm that guy that John was talking about, and that's involved in water court and water rights and all that kind of jazz. Um, let's move along here. So the Division of Water Resources is an agency, one of the divisions under the Department of Natural Resources, and we have a whole bunch of sister agencies. Probably our most, the one we do the most interaction with is the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And I noticed in Lisa's slides, and every one of those slides, and I don't remember her pointing it out, but you could see these little pink red lines up all these streams. She had shown on her layers the in-stream flow water rights that exist in many of the streams in the Upper Gunnison. And those are going to be more important, I believe, in years to come for a variety of reasons. I'll try to get to that. So as John pointed out on one of his slides, the Division of Water Resources is divided up into 7 hydrologic basin areas. And we're the Gunnison Basin. So I'm the managing engineer here in the Gunnison Basin. And then there's also the state engineer's office. So my boss is the state engineer, and his desk resides at 1313 Sherman Street near the Capitol. So our bread and butter at Division of Water Resources is water administration. And again, what is that? I like to think of it this way. If you see water flowing, we tell our water commissioners, put it where it belongs. There are some basins in our division that have ample water supplies. And there are other watersheds and basins in the Gunnison Basin that are maybe really highly over appropriated. And depending on how these basins were developed and the water appropriated, that really determines really how many water commissioners we have on the ground. So our water commissioners, those are our boots on the ground. Those are the folks that are making sure that water is going to those who are entitled to use it in priority. And water in the state of Colorado, that resource is owned by the public. It's owned by the good people of this great state of Colorado. Your water right is the right to use the water. And so when you hear somebody say, that's my water, well, you might have a right to use it. You don't actually own the water. Your decree gives you the right to use that water in priority for whatever uses are specified in that decree and the amount specified in that decree. We have a number of other programs, a dam safety program. And can you all see my mouse, my cursor rolling around there? Okay.
Yes.
And there was some water well permitting or water well questions earlier, and I can answer more questions about that. To go back to the question that was answered earlier about maybe one of the irrigators concerned about their water well going dry. The practical reality of the situation is that you got to drill your well deeper. And if your well isn't deep enough to supply water in a bad drought, you can get a permit to re-drill it, and you're gonna have to drill a little deeper. And so we also administer interstate compacts. There's a number of those. Those are very complicated. We also manage a stream flow gauging system, and we have a bunch of hydrographers, just like Steve Anders with the USGS. Colorado has its own hydrography program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The stream flow gauges are super important to the work we do. And other additional program activities. And I'll talk about maybe one of the main one is working with the water court. So in that water rights process that John was talking about, the division engineer is actually kind of like a de facto third party in every case. So you have the applicant, you have the court, and you have the division engineer. I'm like the eyes and ears of the court. And I write a report that after the application is reviewed, field inspection conducted by my office, I write a report to the court with some recommendations on what should be included in any decree in that case. Okay, so let's go on to water administration. That's our most of our staff in Division Water Resources are those boots on the ground, water commissioners. That's what the COMM is, water commissioners. And then we have Division Water Resources is the entity that writes the permits, that approves the permits for groundwater wells. You cannot install a well in the state of Colorado without a permit. The permit may be under a set of water rights granted by the court in a court-approved augmentation plan. Okay, it's a priority just like any other stream flow water right. Or there's a process for what are called exempt wells. Exempt wells are generally, they're just domestic wells that the permit is issued under a certain set of statutes that exempts them from the priority system of water rights. And I wanted to mention that. So there's two different types of wells essentially in the state of Colorado. Exempt, non-exempt. Most of the water, as you all know, as we've learned from Lisa's slides, is used for agriculture, and that's certainly the case in the Upper Gunnison. I'm going to move on water and get down to water administration. So our water commissioners are those people that are ensuring that water is going to those who are entitled to use it, especially in times of shortage. They're also collecting diversion records of water that is being diverted during the season. John talked about how the state was developed, and it was recognized that to develop the state and to use water as a resource, ditches had to be dug. So there are ditches all over the place. And if your piece of property has a ditch on it, whether there's a platted easement or not, there is, by just virtue of the fact that that ditch exists, there is an easement. And the owner of that right, or the right, that water right that is flowing in that ditch, does have some right into access up and down that ditch to do reasonable maintenance. And the statutes support that. And the Water Commissioner was established in 1979. It was so important to keep peace on the stream and on the rivers back in the day that it was that position was created. And those water commissioners were the ones that made sure that those priority water rights, those senior water rights, were the ones receiving the water in times of shortage. And they shut off or curtail the junior water rights to the level that the senior is satisfied. And then the key statutes that we operate under are really all embedded in Title 37. And Article 92, that's the Water Rights Determination Act that set up the system of water courts that we have today. We have some well permitting sections in Article 90. Article 80 explains the authority that is given to the state engineer and his staff to do their job. And Article 84 explains the responsibility of not just, there's responsibility on the administration side of the division engineer and the water commissioners, but there's also responsibility on the side of the water right owner. And what is that? And that's spelled out in Article 84. I'm going to kind of move along a little bit here. This is what a modern water commissioner's desk looks like. Okay. Back in the day, you'd have a guy, he'd get up and get on his horse and he'd head out and see what water availability is. Today, the first thing the water commissioner does, turns on his computer system, He goes to the StreamFlow website and he's checking water availability. What's in the stream today? And a lot has changed in the last 20 years, let me tell you. The technology that's available today allows our water commissioners to do more and more and more, much more efficiently. And, it never stops. The water court activity never stops. When I first started about 20 years ago, we had nearly 300 water court applications a year that rolled through Division 4. Now it's less than 200. We're in the 170 range. Most of those applications are filed by attorneys on behalf of their client. You can file an application personally. You don't need an attorney to do it. But what it does, it just increases the level of complexity on the stream. And water administration becomes more complex. There isn't any more water. There's just a higher level of complexity and sorting it out. And so that's what all these tools are used for the water commissioner. And believe it or not, the smartphone is become an amazing tool today for our water commissioners. So a water commissioner can do a lot, set his course for the day in the morning by going to the gauges. They live and die by the gauges. Thank you, Steve Anders. And they resort to the statutes. So here's what Title 37 looks like sitting on the water commissioner's desk. And it's well marked, well earmarked, you can see. Okay, moving on. That's our statutes. So the day-to-day administration, okay, setting the call on the stream. I'm going to describe this two different ways because it depends on the basin that you're in. In the Upper Gunnison, we're going to require that water user that wants to place a call because their senior water right is short. We're going to require them to make an official call. We actually have a form that they will complete and submit to our office. We will enter that into the database. Our call records today are very, very good. The maintenance of those records, you can go online at any time and see the status of your stream, whether that's on call or not on call. And if it's on call, how deep is that call? How many priorities are out and where is that call living at? Okay, what priority is that living at? So that's the water commissioner's day-to-day job is and if it's I have an example that's going to be up in the North Fork, actually up in Cedar Edge, and we'll go through that. I'll show you how it's done. We have 11 water commissioners in Water District 40 alone because it's so highly over-appropriated. It's so unbelievably regulated that our water commissioner actually sets the call. And each day he's going to go into the database and let everybody know who's in and who's out because it changes on a day-to-day basis in the North Fork. Okay. So also we're going to ensure that if a call is made, that diversion is being put to its decreed use, that the water isn't going to waste. Believe it or not, I don't know if you would believe this or not, but there's actually people that would call their neighbors out just to spite them, and they would run the water down the ditch. And that's humans being human, unfortunately. So we do police that, and we make sure if you're gonna place a call and shut other people off, you're putting every drop of water to beneficial use. Okay, that's the upshot of it. We also operate augmentation plans, like John described. We're going to make sure that we know how much water is being pumped by those Lake City wells, and we make sure that an appropriate amount of exchange water is put back into the stream to account for their junior diversion. So that's what an augmentation plan is for. It's just it's a plan to keep a junior water right on when it is actually out of priority. And an augmentation plan it's not a water right per se, it's just a plan to operate a junior water right when it's out of priority. And one of the other big things we do is our water commissioners are constantly collecting a diversion record. So in the Upper Gunnison, we have fewer water commissioners. For example, Jack Brzezinski is our water commissioner in Water District 28. There's one person for that entire basin. He's got over 400 active in-use structures. And to get a good diversion record, and you want a good diversion record, so it's an accounting of your use of that water. Every water right owner, in my opinion, needs to ensure that they've got a good accounting of their water use, because that's the value of your water right. So if our water commissioner can get, when that ditch turns on in that irrigation season, when they can get a max flow that was diverted that season, get some records throughout the season, and get when they turn off, that's a good record. And we do have a lot of water right owners that are actually willing to assist the water commissioner, and they will give us user supplied data. Something as simple as you taking their smartphone, taking a picture of their staff gauge on their partial flume, and then sending that to Jack. And that way they can get more and better records and better recorded use of their water right. And again, it's that the use of your water right and continued use, that's the value of your water right. And that's a future value of your water right. I'm not going to bore you with all these, going through these statutes, but the 3792, 501, and 502 and their subchapters, those are subparagraphs. That's what gives the state engineer, the division engineer, and the water commissioner the authority to do the things they do. And the water commissioner actually has more authority to enter property, public and private, than the sheriff. We don't need a warrant. Everybody gets to know that guy climbing over the barbed wire fence and walking up the ditch, well, that's just Jack. And so we also do investigations on well use. So if a water commissioner is going around somebody's house and searching, well, they might be just looking for the location of a well, and it's not considered trespassing. There's no such thing as trespass as long as the water commissioner is doing their job. So now I'm going to give you a little example of how a real world example of day-to-day water administration at a little bit higher level than what normally occurs in the Upper Gunnison. And that's, I'm going to take you up here to the Grand Mesa. Every drop of water on the Grand Mesa has been spoken for over 100 years ago. If you're trying to get in today, you're 100 years too late. So here's a chart that I've used a lot, and Cedar Edge is where and we have a field office in Cedar Edge. And again, I've said we have 11 water commissioners that work in Water District 40 alone. Now, all of these, there's 108 reservoirs on the Division 4 side of the Grand Mesa. And we have George Creek, Ward Creek, Kaiser Creek, Youngs Creek, and Surface Creek. And I color coded the reservoirs to show which stream system they're on. And at the bottom of these, like, let's look at these blue ones here on Ward Creek. At the bottom, we have what's called our control reservoir. This is where we make our final measurement of any stored water that's turned loose, that's released to the stream for use on the thousands of irrigated acres of, you have very valuable apples, peaches, cherries, vineyards. And this storage water is extremely valuable because you can't fallow an apple orchard. It'll die. I mean, so they need this storage water to keep their orchards alive. But we track it all. Of course, we know how much we're turning out of the upper reservoirs, but we finally record it coming out of these lower, what we call our control reservoirs. And here's how that looks in real life. So a water commissioner gets a call from users downstream. When I say call, they get contacted. Hey, we need some, the runoff is over. the natural stream flow is waning. There's not enough natural flow in the stream. We need our storage water. So they make a release. Here's a head gate that was built 100 years ago, still using it today. They turn that water loose to the stream. This is Ward Creek, and it's measured at a measuring flume. We also know from other measurements above the reservoir how much natural flow is in Ward Creek. So what we have where these fellows are standing is storage water combined and commingled with natural flow. And we know how to sort that out. We're taking measurements above the reservoir, and we do the math after the water goes through this flume to know how to ensure we know how much storage water is being released. That water goes downstream, and it goes a long way, actually. We have other gauges in large diversion structures. Here's a head gate that is pressurizes. The stream runs into this pressurized system here, and this is going into a big canal. The extra flow is going out this head gate on the right and back into the stream. And that water commissioner is setting that flow, and it goes downstream, commingles with Kaiser Creek, and it's picked up and we're measuring what is called the common name for this canal here is called the Big Ditch. And our water commissioner is going to read that flume, but we also have a record of it daily use in this stream flow gauge that's put on that flume. Now, what do we do with all the water? Here's how it works. Here's how we know where water is going to be going to those who are entitled to use it. The stream flow has really come down. And on Ward Creek, we have, let's count it. Was it 7? We have 3 CFS of water that's commingled in with the natural flow. And it turns out the natural flow is 18.71 CFS. As the water was coming down, they turned a 0.25 CFS out to a ditch above the gauge. And then the rest of the water is going to go to the number 8, to the Orchard City Pipeline, to the number 9, to the number 42. And I know that sounds weird, but there was a stipulated decree about 80 years ago that put the 42 in above the number 22. And then the 23 is where the, that's the point where the call is at. We call that the swing right. 3 CFS, that final last 3 CFS of water is going into the number 23. And eventually the 23 will drop out because the natural flow will keep coming down. So if you read that partial flume, it was at 0.94 on the gauge. That translates to 21.71. Check. That's where all that water is going to get distributed. And it's as simple as that. And so downstream, you have water commissioners that are making sure that those exact flows are going into the head gates of those ditches down below. And all of that is super important so that the supply that is available, it's reliable, and the water users know, and they can grow these crops. And this is the economic engine of the valley, and it takes a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of moving parts that are going on to make that happen. And the water commissioner is the real engine of it. I don't expect AI will ever take over those positions because it's just too complicated. And I don't ever expect any of these extremely over-appropriated areas to be taken over by AI or anything like that. We'll still need real live bodies to do it.
Thanks, Bob. If you could start wrapping up so we could take a couple questions, that'd be great.
Yep, I'm done. And here's some website you can go to get more information about water. Our Colorado Division of Water Resources website, Water Education Colorado, the CSU Colorado Water Center. And this is a monthly publication that I like, the Water Report. I read it it's like a periodical. You can read it every month. And that's all I have. And any questions, I would be happy to take them.